ASP.NET stands for Active Server Pages, and it is a server-side web development technology. Now, using that technology, you can build browser-based applications. So, as a client, when you request a resource from the internet, on the other side there is a web server. For Microsoft, this web server preference for a long time was IIS, but with .NET Core and Microsoft going open platform, there are a bunch of other web servers that got added. One such server is Kestrel. It's called Kestrel, right? And another is called Nginx. So these are a couple of servers that works alongside IIS, and they are supported in .NET Core. A request that comes from the server, the first place where it hits it is the IIS. This request itself is sent over HTTP or HTTPS, which is an application layer protocol. So if you have studied the OSI model, the full name is ISO OSI. OSI stands for OpenStack. I'm forgetting the name. OSI stack. It is called the Open System Interconnection, and then it has 7 layers in it. The first layer is application. I'm so sorry. The last layer is application. The first layer is the physical layer. So this is where the Ethernet card and the LAN cable connection works. Above this is a network layer, or if I am right, it is the data link layer. I'm sorry, yeah, it is a data link layer. Above this is the network layer. The IP mode of communication that we use, Internet Protocol, it runs at the network layer. Above this, we have the transport layer, and then the TCP and UDP. If you've heard the protocol words before, TCP runs at the transport layer. Above this, we have a session layer and a security layer, I guess, a presentation layer. Right? And above that, there is the application layer where we have the HTTP protocol. Some commands that you've used like ping and IGMP, right? They work at, if I'm right, at the IP level. So when you ping an IP, you provided an IP address like 10.0.0.10, for example, right? You are going to hit the IP, and the network communication itself is going to happen at this particular layer. When we develop applications, we are mostly running at the highest layer. All of the layers that sit below, they'll be taken care of by the server and by the operating system in your computer. Now, when somebody enters a URL, the URL of your website, they are going to specify the protocol HTTP or HTTPS, and then this protocol will have an IP address or a domain name defined in this link. This link eventually is going to use the complex logic of resolving the IP address. It is going to hit your router, and if your router does not have a path to it, it is going to jump to other routers, and through the internet it is eventually going to reach this point, which is your server. Now, as the part of your infrastructure setup, you will have to open up specific ports on the this protocol. HTTP works on port number 80. Inside your network, you will have to provide access to this particular port, and you can do these settings in your Wi-Fi, in your internet router as well. And then once you open up this port, it is going to come inside, and it'll it'll be given to a software that can handle the requests that are coming from the internet. Once the software is IIS and Visual Studio provides you another IIS Express version which runs um, inside the Visual Studio IDE itself. When we are doing .NET Core application development, .NET Core, the ASP.NET DLL itself is going to have a version of Kestrel in it itself. So when a request arrives, the Kestrel server will be able to do all the activities that this IIS server is doing. When we develop web applications using technologies like ASP.NET MVC, uh, what we are doing is we are integrating to one of these web server technology, either IIS or Kestrel or Nginx. Right? So the MVC application is going to sit over here, and so everything is kind of integrating across the internet on the Windows or Linux machine that you are running it on. This thing is going to fit into the infrastructure part, and it is going to receive requests. But then what we do when that request arrives is something that we're going to write in an MVC application. Now, MVC itself stands for model, view, and controller. A model is representation of the domain. If you're working in, say, a university domain, your classes are going to look like university and courses and instructors and students and what how our students enroll into which courses, which classes, stuff like that. A domain can represent multiple things like a database and how we are interacting, or the C# code using which we are going to do the persistence of the data that we are creating. The view itself is a little tricky concept, and ASP.NET MVC makes it really flexible. So a view is something with which a user can interact. Now, generally, people think that it is the browser and the HTML and the buttons and the checkboxes that we are creating. That is a view, but that need not always be true. The view could also be a PDF file. A view could also be an audio file, right? Anything that the user receives on their end and interacts with, they all fall under the category of a view. A controller is, if you remember seeing the design pattern name, the controller itself is a mediator design pattern. A mediator sits between two entities, and it facilitates communication. A controller is going to sit between model and the view, and the whole objective of this controller is to hide the implementation detail, or or where we want to extract the data from the view. So the view should be as independent, as disconnected from the source of the information, right? And all that communication will be driven by the controller. Now, there are a couple of other patterns that run on the same line. If you've already heard MVC, you might have already you might have heard of MVVM, then MVP, and there is another MVA architecture. Generally, it is also written as MV star or MV whatever. Right? The distinction between these three patterns is that which object is going to get created first when a request arrives at the server. So as we are building these applications, the request is definitely going to arrive at the server level. The server is going to identify, based on how we have configured it, where this request is supposed to go. There will be a special folder in the server, and then in this server we are going to have a couple of files like our HTML files, CSS file, and JavaScript files, and we are also going to deploy our DLL file or the assemblies, right? The web server is going to pick up, is going to know this folder depending on what URL you are sending that request to and how you are hitting this endpoint. And based on that, it is going to pick up one of the folder and will start catering to requests from this point onwards. Depending on what your application is, in MVC, the first object that is going to get created from model view and controller is going to be the controller, right? You are going to have more complex URL than this. Your home URL is going to sit here, and then if you want to access the student information, you're going to mention student. If you want to access the instructor information, you're going to mention instructor over here. And then if you want to see what courses are available, you're going to hit the courses URL. Now all these URL, they are sitting somewhere in our C# code that we are going to write as part of the MVC application. The web server has intuitive knowledge of how to route, how to send this information to the appropriate C# file, and that file in our case is going to be a controller file. The controller is going to reach out to domain, it is going to extract out the data, and it is going to change that data into a format that the view can understand. The view itself is going to take that data and it is going to return it to the UI, and depending on what format of view we have, we are either going to generate an HTML or a PDF or an MP3, and there are multiple other such options. So this is the general flow of an MVC application. So let's go ahead and get started with a quick demo. So far we have used Visual Studio for writing our application, and I'm going to show you that flow real quick, but then we are very soon going to jump into the the console as well. So I'm going to come to File, New, select Project, and over here I'm going to type ASP.NET. When I choose all platform, I want C# all platform. I was right, and then I'm going to pick up the template of ASP.NET Core web app. Right, this is going to create a .NET Core application. And then if you choose this option, this is going to be Windows specific, which is the .NET Framework option. If you're going to choose .NET Core, hit next, and over here I can give MVC demo. Right, in the next field I have an option of choosing the .NET Framework. I can choose the authentication type. I'm going to leave this authentication type alone, but I'm going to check the configure HTTPS. Right, we are not going to do Docker for another 2 to 3 weeks, but when we do Docker, I am going to show you a trick if we would want to enable this right now, right away, or we're going to do it a little later. But we are not going to choose it for today, and I'm not going to select this one as well. I'm going to hit the create button. Give me 1 second. Let me switch to my regular code folder. Alright, so a default MVC application has been created for us, and let's analyze the folder structure. So what we are already familiar with is app settings.json and the program.cs file. So let's go ahead and open up the program.cs file, and this looks very familiar. We have already seen main function, the static main function, which is the entry point. And what we have already also seen is that with C#9, we don't require the main function at all. If you want to leave it here as is, you can leave it, or you have an option of deleting this, and it'll work just fine. I don't know if you can leave public here, but this will work just fine. Right, the startup class here probably has a different visibility, so this code is going to work just as well as the default code that is generated. Right, so The first function that the main function is calling is the create host builder. It returns an object of I host builder. This is an interface, and then it is calling the run function. This is very similar to the app.run that we were doing in the past. So this app.run is going to trigger the web host. So it is going to build a host, and this host is going to spin up the application. So if I can go back to this diagram, what that statement actually is saying that go ahead and create this particular server for me, which is going to receive all these requests. Right? If we go inside the create host builder function itself, it has a a class host, and if we read through the definition, it's going to say provide convenience methods for creating instance of the iHost builder. Right? The host builder has at least two implementation, uh, the default builder and the default builder with command line arguments. So once we have the default builder, we are going to configure this application for running on the web, right? And then the object that it is returning, using that object, we are calling configure web host builder default. And this is another extension method. Once again, static class, static function, and the first parameter is this. So what we are doing, we are adding a method on the iHost builder interface, and the method name is configure web host default. The second parameter it takes is an action. So when this function actually executes, it is going to come inside our code through the host builder object, and it is going to say that the startup file is the startup.cs. Okay, the startup.cs is going to have the initial wiring of the code, but after this function returns and this run function, we would have essentially created this particular component, right? And this function knows how to provide this mapping of URLs with our application. So let's go ahead and see what the startup file has. I'm going to hit Control M, Control L. Why does that? So when I hit that button, it is going to toggle everything. It's going to tuck everything together, and it is going to show me the outline of the application. I'm going to hit on double click on these three dots, which is going to open up just this file structure. So the startup class has at least two important things. One is configure services, and the second is configure. Right? These are some local members, local constructor, where the initialization is happening. So the I configuration is coming from some place, right? This is constructor injection. We have seen an example of this, that when you pass an interface object to a constructor, somebody who is instantiating this object is going to send us a copy of this, which we are saving for our local references. Now, if I jump to the definition of this configuration and read through the documentation, it's going to say it represents a set of key value application configuration properties. We have seen this in the entity framework code demo, that we have the configuration properties, and this is going to give us the key value pair, right? So this essentially, for us, it is coming through this file, the app.setting. And right now we have only two settings. One is for logging, and we are logging information, and for Microsoft log, we are doing some warning and some other information log. If you want to activate any form of logging in your application, you're going to come here and include the DLL name over here, and you're going to specify of what level of logging you want to provide here. This is the host that can come in, and then if you want to do connection string over here, through IntelliSense, we see that connection string is present here, and then to connection string we can give different name, and over here we are going to provide the DB connection string. Right, we're going to pick this from the server side. But then this is how you add settings to the app settings, and the startup.cs, it receives these setting information from somewhere else, and that somewhere else can be configured over here. This web builder, I'm not sure if it's going to work. Okay, the way we are configuring the host, we can also configure the app settings, and the function name is a little funny. It's called configure app configuration. Right. Once again, it is a delegate, so I'm going to define the delegate over here, and inside this config, you can do config dot add JSON file. Remember seeing this function from yesterday, from the entity framework core session, where we specified the app settings.json file over here in double quotes. Right? If you have multiple setting file that you want to add to your solution, this is your spot. You come here and then you add multiple JSON file. But there are other ways through which you can configure this environment as well. One is the environment variable. Now, so if you so path is an environment variable, but then you're not restricted to only path. If you want to say save connection string over here, you can define connection string as db connection string, and then the connection string itself will become an environment variable. Now, if I do connection string, it's going to print an error message. To print the value, you might have to do this, right? And it is saying, it is printing this value. Probably my syntax is not right, but we got the value and it executed that thing as a command. So I'll have to put the echo keyword, and then using percentage connection string, I'll now be able to print the value inside this environment variable, right? So ASP.NET Core, it allows you to configure your system to take settings from multiple places. The easiest is JSON file because it lives alongside your project. It can become part of your source control, your Git repositories, or if you want to have some form of control and you don't want to check in those things because it is specific to a computer and you want it protected, you're going to give an option of environment variables. You can get it through command line. There are multiple other options through which you can do this, like INI files, in-memory collection, right? And you are not restricted to only these options. You can custom build your own mechanisms of extracting settings. You're going to delete this because it might cause some exception, but there are multiple ways you can configure an application. By default, it is going to pick up the app settings, and then the app settings themselves, they're going to be available in the configuration object to us. We are saving a local copy of the configuration inside this iConfiguration reference. The two functions are configure service and configure, and the configure service is taking iService collection. We have seen this interface in a great detail in the solid principles example. But what I remember seeing is that there was services dot we were doing add scoped, and over here we had a writer interface and the concrete implementation, the message writer itself. But this one looks a little tricky, right? It says add razor pages, and I don't know what this is, so let's hover over it, and it is saying it is an extension method. When I hit F12 on this, it takes me to a built-in an assembly of MVC. So MVC has some built-in references. You can do add razor pages, you can do add MVC, you can add controllers, and you can add controllers with views. Now, when I created this application, the template that I selected was the razor pages application. When you're building MVC application, this start.cs configure service function, it is going to have a few more extension methods which is going to do the configuration. As we make progress on the course, I'm going to show you what goes inside these methods. Right? But then for now, we have added support for razor pages. If I now go to the second function, that is called configure, and configure is taking two parameters. One is application builder and the web host environment itself. Now, if I look at this function, it is saying environment.isDevelopment, which means that if we are doing development work, We want to see the exceptions that a page throws in a friendly way, right? In a developer friendly way. But then, if it is not a development environment, we are not going to we're not going to do this. We are not going to give our exceptions out um, to the viewers, to the clients. We are going to hide, and we're going to hide the developer exceptions. We are not going to show them the stack trace. Instead, we're going to show them a friendlier error message page. Right. So the question is, how does it know through which environment, through which setting it knows that we are in the development environment? And that setting can be accessed through this properties. So you go to project properties and you look for debug, and inside debug you're going to have environment variables of ASP.NET Core environment development. And because this is an environment variable, when we spin up the console in which it is going to run, this variable is going to get added. That is my guess on this. So this variable here is going to influence which way of exception or error handling we are going to do at the UI level. Next is uh, the application is saying use HTTPS redirection. Remember choosing HTTPS while we were building the application, while we were creating the project, right? This is going to make sure that if the user hits the HTTP URL, it is going to get redirected to the SSL enabled HTTPS secure website. Use static files. It is going to give access to the files in the www root folder. And over here, we're going to have the CSS, we're going to have JavaScript, and we're going to have a lot of jQuery and the favorite icon. So everything that is public and should be accessible by everybody, even those who are trying to access the resources, we put them in the www root folder. It has public access. Use routing is going to define these routes. If you want to go to student page, instructor page, courses page, use routing is going to enable that routing functionality. And then use authorization is going to provide support for user ID and password. And use endpoints the is going to map the URL with the Razor pages. Right? So this is where all the mapping of the server and what we are putting in the MVC side or our code side, it is going to happen. So start a file. We're going to work more closely on this file as we make progress on our course. Now let's jump to the second folder, which is the pages folder. Now this is where the actual pages live. There are two folders inside. There is another nested folder inside it, shared. We're going to look at that folder a little later. But then uh, the other files that are present in this folder, they are view imports, view start. Any file that starts with underscore, it has a special syntax, a special interpretation at the .NET world. There's three files that we see, error, index, and privacy. The extension is not HTML. The extension is CSHTML. So these are not HTML pages. These are Razor pages. Right? Remember seeing the word Razor? Somewhere we had add Razor pages, right? And these are the Razor pages that our application is going to use. If I open up the index.cshtml, index generally has become the standard of the entry point of a web application. So we see that it starts with an @ sign and it says @page. Then it has a model, which is the index model, and there is some block of code which is assigning a title of home page, and then there is a div tag from HTML. We don't see any HTML head and body element. We only see the direct inside HTML content of it. There is a welcome message and there is a paragraph which says that you can learn more about ASP.NET Core at this URL. Let's look at the error.cshtml file, and the syntax or the structure is pretty similar. It starts with @page, it has a model, it has a couple of view data, and then it has an if statement as well, an if block. So a razor page is a combination of C# syntax. Right? This looks like a C# statement. This if block looks like a C# statement. A razor page lets you switch between HTML and C#, and then the trick is anything that starts with the um, symbol, the code that follows it is a C# code. And then Razor, the engine itself, is a little smart. It knows when the C# part has ended and when the HTML piece has started. Right? So it is the error page itself is saying that we are in the development mode and swapping to something, and then there's a friendly message over here. The heading is error, the page paragraph, it's going to display this information. Then there's a privacy page which is going to talk about the privacy policy of the site. Let's look at the view start. And the view start is a special syntax, and every page that is going to be in our application is going to use this view start page as the beginning point, the entry point. And it is saying that the layout of this application is underscore layout. Right? If you have not seen this so far, it is present in the shared folder. And then there's a view imports. So the view imports is bringing in the pages that sits in the pages folder. It is creating namespace. So once again, this is the C# code, Blazor syntax, @ and the namespace is like defining namespace over here. And then using view imports, we have defined that the pages inside this application, they're going to have this namespace. And then there is add tag helper. So a tag helper is something that we're going to see very shortly, but then it is including all the tag helpers from this particular namespace. Right. Let's go inside the shared folder and see what we have. In the underscore layouts, this is where we have our HTML code, the head and the body, the header, the div, and the rest of the code. Now, for even this is a razor page, and it's with @ it is referring to some collection somewhere, and it is extracting the title property. So if you look at this view data, we have set this view data in 3 places. View data title is error, view data title is homepage, and view data title is privacy policy. Right? So through view data, we are passing information across different view members. If I hit F12 on view data, I was hoping that I will be taken to the definition, but then when Visual Studio don't resolve this for you, you can always fall back to what we saw on the first session of .NET. You can always open up ISY, and once again I'm trying my luck. Let's see, view data is a type, and it is not showing up anything. I might have to include a couple of assemblies over here, but then with that, you should be able to see the definition of this. But because F12 is not working, I'm going to hover over it and I'm going to look at this definition. It is saying view data dictionary, and probably I'm trying one more time with ISY. If I type view data dictionary, if it shows anything, and then I don't know if there's an option of editing, type in numbers. Okay, I might have to include an assembly over here. A view data dictionary is a dictionary, and then it takes T model as an object. A dictionary, what we have seen in the collection classes, is key value pair. If I go to the definition of this, it is inheriting from iDictionary. And that's why knowing collection classes is so important, because using this, you're going to identify that if I pass it string in the index operator, it is going to get the value of that particular index, that particular key. So the key for us is title, and through title, we are setting it to a specific value. And then this is the set operation, but then in the h1 tag, we are using the get operation. So it is going to get the key information and it's going to display the page in the h1. Once again, jumping back to the layout razor page, and we've already seen this part. Scrolling down, this looks like standard HTML. We are linking CSS, other CSS files, and then we have a header, and inside header we have navigation elements. I hope you remember seeing these navbar expand SM in the Bootstrap session and the Bootstrap cheat sheet, right? We are creating a navigation, and inside navigation we have classes, and we have not seen this type of attribute in the HTML that we have seen so far, right? These are special HTML5 syntax, and then they are interpreted based on the um, based on the server where this application is running. So it is saying that there is no area, but then the page itself is pointing to /index, right? There is no CS HTML to it, but then this is like declaring a href equal to /index.html, right? So Razor pages have their own syntax, and if you want to link two pages, you're not going to use href, you're going to use ASP-page. So I'm going to keep this commented for your reference, but this page is, the link itself is going to be MVC demo, and it's going to take you to the index page. Then there is a button, there is a div element inside the navigation. In the main section, there's a div called container, and the main element is itself has another Razor function, and it is called render body. Now, render body is going to one of these three pages: the error page, the index page, and the privacy page. It is going to pick up the pages and it's going to replace it inside the main section. Then there's a footer, and then there are a couple of scripts that we have included, and this was our general syntax as well when we were doing HTML, that we include the script at the end of the body. So all the body elements, the HTML elements, have been rendered, and then the code comes here. And then if you remember seeing the await keyword in the task parallel programming, it is doing the scripts rendering. It is essentially getting the scripts that we can define in our Razor pages, and it is going to add them over here at the base of the page. So let's go ahead and hit this button, IIS Express. But there's this little icon here. If I click on this, we are going to see another option. One is IIS Express, and the second is the MVC demo. IIS Express is the default Visual Studio built-in IIS version, which is very limited. And because we are moving towards the .NET Core implementation, we're going to avoid using IIS Express. We're going to switch to the MVC demo, right? And then when you make that switch, MVC demo starts to appear here. If you hit this, the server is going to start. But then I want to show you another thing where these settings are coming from. And if we look at the properties folder, there's something called as launch settings. If I double click on this, this is another JSON file. This JSON file has IIS setting, and it has two profiles in it. One profile is IIS Express, and second is MVC demo. If I change this MVC demo to the server name itself, right, notice that the MVC demo option has gone, and now we are seeing Kestrel. It's a different server. It is not the built-in default IDE miniature version of IIS. If you don't want this, it is perfectly okay to get rid of this from this setting, and you can have Kestrel as the only option in the profile. These profiles, they appear inside this list, and you also have an option of choosing the browser. Then there's this IIS setting. So when you choose IIS, the service, it runs on this particular port, but with Kestrel, it is going to run on HTTPS localhost 5001, and if you specify HTTP, you will have to go to 5000. I hope you remember seeing this middleware. It is use HTTPS redirection. So in case we hit this URL, we should be redirected to the HTTPS localhost 5001. So we'll never be able to access the site using the HTTP protocol. And remember seeing the environment variable, ASP.NET Core environment development. When the application starts in the console mode, which is the Kestrel mode in which we're going to run it, uh, this launch setting is going to ensure that this environment variable is added and it has this particular value assigned. So with that, let's go ahead and hit the run button. Okay, I should have shown you one more thing. I'm going to right click on the project, and because it is building, it is so it launched this command prompt window, and it has printed some debugging. Remember seeing this namespace somewhere? It was part of the app settings.json file where we had enabled logging. And because that logging is enabled and we have mentioned this particular name, it is printing all the information level log. So it is saying that we are now listening on HTTPS localhost 5001, and we are also listening on localhost 5000, right? And then it is saying that the application has started, and if you want to stop it, you'll have to hit Control C, and it's going to shut down the server. Now, the environment variable, it is setting the environment variables through the launch setting file, and it is saying that the environment itself is host development, and it is saying that the root path of our application is this particular folder. Right? It also launched a browser window for us. It's launched localhost 5001, and this is the MVC demo, the home link, and the privacy. The welcome message is coming from the index page. So if I do a little back and forth between the solution explorer and the window, it is this welcome message that we are seeing, and this is the link that where we can learn more about ASP.NET Core. If I hit the privacy button, it is going to say that it is the privacy policy, and use this page for your implementing your privacy. There is another link. This is the footer section, this is the main section, and this is the navigation section. I'm going to go back to the index page, right click and click on view page source. The page source itself is the entire HTML of that page, but then we have already seen that it is all coming from the underscore layout.cshtml, and over here we had @view data, and then in the square brackets in the index we were passing title. So the title of the page is going to sit inside the title HTML tag, and the links are present over here. Then we had another ASP hyphen link. Did I say that right? So over here we had ASP hyphen page. I'm sorry, it was ASP hyphen page, and then the page got translated to an anchor tag with href. But then I'm sure that nowhere inside the container, the first tag that we have, it refers to ASP page. The Razor engine is picking up on these attributes and it is replacing them with the appropriate value. So there is a degree of dynamicity to it. The Razor pages are getting processed by the .NET Core engine, and it is converting all these attributes to the HTML standard syntax. So href is going to sit here, then there's a class name, and then because area has no value, it is not doing any addition to it, right? But then area eventually becomes part of the href as well. The render body. So inside main, we are calling the render body, and let's go look for that now. So inside the main tag, what we have is this div here, and this div is actually coming from the index Razor page, right? What we had specified is that it has a model. Then we have set on this page the view data. The view data got replaced and filled up this section, and the render page is picking up everything that is part of the page. So the div itself is going to come and sit inside the main content. Right? This is all coming from index.cshtml, and the rest of the application, the rest of the HTML of this page is coming from the underscore layout Razor page. Because we have not defined any script tag over here, it has ignored the await render section async because there is no script that we have added to our index page so far. So this is the general structure of an ASP.NET MVC Razor Pages application. In the earlier version of uh, MVC, there was a different there was a different way of creating these applications, and it would give you an option of picking up the right framework. But this version, it does not give you those options. So let me go ahead and show you at least two more ways of creating these applications. So I've launched a new version, a new instance of Visual Studio. I'm going to say File, New Project. I'm going to say ASP.NET Core. And then inside Core, what we have picked up was Web App. There is another option called Empty. It appears simple, but then unless you are like extremely pro in MVC concepts, you should not use this template. You should let Visual Studio uh, scaffold most of the folder structure and application structure for you. When you want to create MVC application, you're going to pick up this template. When you want to build Web API application, you're going to pick up this template. When you want to create a gRPC service, you're going to pick up this template. For Angular and React application, you have these three options. Right? This is F#, this is not C#, but then I don't know why it is coming up in this list because I have filtered specifically for C#. So there are multiple projects that you can create. What we have seen is Razor Pages. Now let's go ahead and pick up this option. But I told you that ASP.NET and .NET Core itself is cross-platform, and you are not going to have Visual Studio, not in this friendly format on other platforms, and you will have to fall back to using the command line options. And we have not seen command line options so far for building projects. So I'm going to do a quick cheat sheet opening, .NET CLI, and then I'm going to search for cheat sheet. So .NET CLI cheat sheet by Uber. Let's just go ahead with this one. And then there are options called .NET New, then .NET Solution, then .NET Add, Build, Run, .NET Clean, Publish, NuGet, Remove, and there are options for environment variables. There's option for package, and there's option for entity framework. Right? You're going to look at the .NET New option. So I've already launched the console window for you. I'm going to go to the code folder, and over here we are going to run the .NET command itself. So let's type .NET first. If you have seen this in the past, if I type .NET -info, it's going to give me the information of what version of or the information of the current .NET platform. So the version itself is 5.0. The commit itself, because .NET is open source, they give you the commit number against which you are running this DLL. Then the environment that you are running in, the host, the CLR that we are configured to, the SDK. SDK is what version of software development you can do, and then the runtime that is installed on this computer. Right? You can also install manually using this particular link. There is another command called .NET. I don't know if it is hyphen version. Right. So .NET hyphen version is only going to pick up this one line from the output and only going to display this number. So this is the easy way of checking the .NET version that you have. If I just type .NET, it prints a nice help, and it says that there are options that I'll have to pick up from. -h is short for -help. They are both going to give you the same output. I'm going to hit Control L, which is going to clear the screen, and then type .NET -help. That's going to give you everything that you can do with the .NET CLI. CLI is command line interface, and the SDK options and the SDK commands. .NET Add is going to help you add a package or a reference to a .NET project. So what we were doing here inside the solution, I'm going to stop the project, and I'm going to right click on the solution and show you the equivalent option. So you can do .NET add, and okay, let me right click on dependencies. You can add project reference, you can add shared project reference, COM reference, or you can add NuGet packages. What this command essentially says is that add a package, a NuGet package, or another DLL or assembly from a different project. Right? Build is going to do this activity, build, and then build solution. Right? The build server is interact with server started by build. Then there's clean option. I can right click on the solution and I can say clean solution. I can right click on the project and say clean. Right? So this option here is coming through this particular command line option. So everything that we were able to do through the user interface, we have command line options available to do those same activities. So there's help, there's list, ms build, new, create a new .NET project, right? But then when we went to this new screen, there are hundreds of options. So let's go ahead and explore what new looks like. So I'm going to say .NET new. I'm going to hit enter, and it's saying getting ready. And the options that were coming on the UI, they are displayed a little differently. So you can give the template name or you can give a short name. So if you want to create a console application, what we're going to type .NET new console, and it's going to create a console application, but then probably it'll require some additional parameters. So if I hit enter now, it has gone ahead and it has already created a project, and the project name itself is code.project. And because we are in the code folder, it has picked up the project name as the folder name itself. Right? If you want to provide a custom name to this, you will have to pass additional arguments. Don't know why it's taking so long. So I'm just going to give it a moment to finish. Till then, we can finish off with where we left. So we have an option of creating new projects, .NET new, and then the project short name. It's going to provision that project for you. This new itself has multiple options of its own, and you can influence the project name that you want to give. There's a help that you can get on that. You can you can do NuGet operation. You can create a NuGet package using .NET pack command. You can publish it to a deployment environment. Right. Then you can remove a package or a product or a project using this remove command. .NET restore is equivalent to running this command here. So if I click on the solution, there's something called restore NuGet package, and this is going to go to the NuGet server and it is going to fetch all the NuGet packages that we have mentioned. If I double click on the project name, NuGet gets a special entry over here because we don't have any package, we're not seeing it, but then there's another property group, and inside this property group there is probably a package, right? So package ID, and through this package ID you can specify the if not package ID, it's going to be something else, but then you can specify a NuGet package inside the csproj file. When you run the restore command, everything that is present here, it gets a copy of that and makes it part of the project. And while we are okay, so the restore has succeeded. If I hit dir, we are going to see code.csproj somewhere, code.csproj, and if I restore is going to bring back the NuGet packages. The run command is going to start the application. SLN is going to let you create and interact with the solution level. Store is something I'm seeing for the first time. Store the specified assemblies in the runtime package store. I don't know what this is. Then we can fire up unit test cases. Then there are tools that you can install and manage. One such tool that we have already seen is the Entity Framework Core, and then you have option of adding Visual Studio test cases. There's something called as dev certificates. You remember choosing the HTTPS certificate option. When you choose that, it is through this command line option that the certificate is created. Then there are options for F# and SQL, and there's something called as watch. So if you want to avoid running the application and building the application every time, You can run the watch command. It's going to be like .NET watch and then the project DLL itself, the assembly itself. And then every time you hit the save button, the watch is going to compile the code in the background for you. And you can just go and start looking at the web browser. So the type command is going to type the content of the file. And this CS Plus file structure is exactly like the MVC application that we are seeing. One thing that I forgot showing you is if I right click and go to the properties and select application, the output type itself is a console application. So the MVC project or the web project that we create, they themselves are console application project. And then it is these console applications that get fired up from main, and then main gives away the control and spins up an IIS application or a web browser. I'm so sorry, a web server. Right? And then, but it is not a web application. It is a console application, right? So so let's go ahead and create a folder. We have already called it MVC demo. I'm going to create another folder, MVC demo 2, MVC demo 2. And then now if I do .NET new MVC and I do -- help, it's going to give me the option of, okay, it's going to give me all the options that I can use inside the MVC project. So I can give it a name using the -n option. I can specify where I want output and a bunch of other options like what kind of authentication you want. We had not selected this option when we were building the application, right? This is going to exclude the launch settings. No HTTPS is going to make sure that the HTTPS checkbox that we had, it is not going to get included, right? So I'm going to do .NET new MVC -- I'm going to call it, say, university. .app, hit the enter button. That's going to create a university app for us. Similarly, we can create a .NET new solution. I'm hoping that it's going to work, and we'll call it university, right? So a solution file is created and a CS project is also created. If I hit ls, which is equivalent for dir, you're going to see a solution file and we're going to see an app folder. If I do university.app here, if I do dir on that, it is going to show us the same file, that there is an application settings.json, app settings.json, there's controllers, model, object, program.cs, and a bunch of other folders. We have already seen these files and folders in the Razor application. So we can create a project using command line as well. Now we have to add, let's go ahead and type the university.sln, right? And this solution does not include any project file. So you can run the .NET add command, give it the project name, .NET sln -- help, and then to sln you give the add command. So .NET sln add, and then the project path itself is university app .university_app.cs project. If I hit enter here, the project is going to get added to the solution. Now if I type the university.solution file, it is going to display a lot more information. So earlier it was like 10-20 lines, but then no project information. With this command executed, it is showing that the project university app is now part of the solution. We are going to do .NET run here, and it is saying that it cannot find a project file. So to specify the project, we're going to use the -- project switch, and we're going to specify university app, and now it is building. Right, and this is the same output that we saw when we when we hit the cancel button here. Now, because that is going to run into an error because the localhost 5000 we have already consumed. So it is giving an error that localhost 5001 is already gone. Somebody's using it. So it's not going to spin up another server at the same URL. So I'm going to close out of this, and we are once again going to launch this in the browser window. Right, and it is the same application that got created through command line option as well. All right, so it is already 9:10 on the clock. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. We're going to meet again at 9:20, 10 minutes. Right, thank you guys. Right, so before we went on break, we saw how to create .NET project from the console and how to run them from the console itself. The project itself is available in MVC code 2. I'm going to create a new instance of the browser, of the command prompt. I'm going to go to code MVC demo 2, and I can launch it using Visual Studio Code. The command is code dot. It is going to fire up VS Code with the open folder structure. Yes, and our solution structure is going to appear over here. Now, one thing that is different in .NET Framework and .NET Core is that the project or the solution, the project does not list down all the files that are included inside the project. As long as those files are present in the, as long as the file is present in the folder structure. So if I reveal it in File Explorer, and come over here, if I add a new file to this, so it's not going to be very happy about program.cs, but then if I do test.cs here like this, it is directly going to get added to the folder structure. Right now it's going to complain that there's a repeat in the file name. This should fix it. But for for the IDE experience, you can always go to VS Code, and you can do all the development that you were able to do inside Visual Studio Code, inside Visual Studio, inside this IDE as well. There are extensions that you can install. There are extensions that you can install for ASP.NET Core, and in those extensions, they'll give you the same abilities that uh, the Visual Studio is giving you. So through the right tools, you should be able to create controllers and all these scaffolding code through these extensions as well. I'm not going to show that to you today. I'm going to limit myself to Visual Studio, and let's go ahead and open up the project. So I'm going to say file open project slash solution. Alright, so we are back to Visual Studio, and then this folder structure is a little different than the Razor Pages folder structure. So let's look at the difference. There's a folder in the previous version that we created. There's a Pages folder, right? In the current code that we created, there are three folders: View, Model, and Controller, right? Or Model, View, and Controller. These three folders. The controller itself has a class called Home Controller, right? The View has a folder which matches the name of the controller, which is home, and then we have index and privacy Razor Pages, which appear almost the same as the index and privacy.cshtml from pages folder. Once again, we have the shared folder, and once again we have view start and view import. This is the test file that we added. I'm going to get rid of it, right? And then the program file is once again doing almost the same thing. It is creating a host builder, which is eventually going to configure the web server. And over here, we are specifying the startup file. The startup file is a little different. We had in the configure services add razor pages. This time we have add controllers with views, right? Because we have controllers and views over here. In the configure method, its development looks same, the error handling looks same, HTTPS redirection, static files. We did not have use routing back then, did we? Okay, so we had use routing. Use routing is going to provide support for these routes in the browser address bar. And we had use authorization then as well. And then in the use, probably we didn't have use endpoints. So in MVC, we have use endpoints and we are doing map controller with route. And notice that it has a specific structure to path like controller home/index. And in the razor pages, we had use endpoints and it was mapping the razor pages. The razor pages themselves, they sit in the pages folder and they are sitting right in this folder here. But with MVC, the the solution itself is divided in two parts. So if you open up the razor page, you're going to see that there is um, a razor view, which is a combination of CS, C Sharp, and HTML. But then if you look at map controller route and look at the controller is pure C Sharp file, right? It does not have any HTML in it, right? There are two views that we saw, index and privacy. If I right click inside the function, there are two options that I get. One is add view and the second is go to view. I'm going to choose go to view and it takes me to the appropriate mapped view. There's a views folder, there's a home folder, and there's index.cshtml. Now, we don't see as much HTML over here as we saw in the razor pages. This section is missing, right? There are two scenarios. There are two separate scenarios when you're going to pick the razor pages based solution or the MVC based solution. When you're building a simple application and you want some degree of dynamic behavior to it, razor pages make sense, right? But when your domain is going to be complex, you're working, say, on an e-commerce application or a university application, and you foresee that there are going to be a significant number of routes and pages and the application interaction. There will be some domain rules that student cannot submit assignment or can submit assignment for a specific course. You would not want to embed the entire logic inside these razor pages. This is good when you have a default data extraction application. Like, I mean, somebody's creating a blog site. So the blog site, one page is going to display first 10 blogs and there's going to be a menu at the right. For those kind of application, this seems okay. But then for more serious enterprise development, you're going to have to rely to the MVC based solution where the controllers, they are only going to do the data extraction and view management logic, and the views, they are only going to receive the data from the view and they're going to render it here, right? So with that, let's go ahead and give this application a spin. You are not going to notice much. I'm going to once again switch to University app and hit Control F5. Because this application probably is already running, I'm going to have to stop it just like this. And now if I hit Control F5, it started the server in the console and it spun up this browser tab going to the localhost 5000. Probably a good time to go to localhost colon 5000 and notice that there is no S here. If I hit enter, it is going to redirect to the HTTPS version, connection safe, and it also changed the port number. It is because of the use HTTPS redirection. Now, I want to talk about the MVC model itself, and for that, we're going to bring up this website. So I hope you remember seeing this um, website earlier from our entity framework session. The last time around, we talked about the unit of work, and we also talked about the repository. A repository is an object relationship matter category, and the unit of work is the behavior pattern of object relations. Today, we are going to talk about a couple more patterns from this list. One is the domain model. The second is related to view and view transform. So transform view, two-step view, and template view. So they fall under the category of web presentation pattern, and we're going to talk about the MVC pattern itself, right? When I click on this, you're going to notice a diagram which has three components to it: a controller, a model, and a view. Now, notice the arrow pointers. The view is interacting with controller, so there's a back and forth. There's a arrow on both the sides of these blocks. But then the model, right? View is consuming the model, and controller is also kind of coordinating with the model. The model does not send anything to the view or to the controller, right? So the MVC pattern is created with the intention of separating or having a boundary between the view and the model. Now, this model is going to store domain. A domain is a problem area where you're going to create specific entities and specific object. So if I use words like university, student, instructor, course, enrollment, fees, test, exams, you would understand that we are somehow in the education domain. When I use words like hospital and bed and patient and disease and vaccines and drives, like we are in the healthcare domain. So the model, the only concern of a model should be creating those entities or those classes which are going to have, which is going to talk about the domain itself. With that, I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick up the discussion of the domain model. But then this domain model itself sits inside a category called domain logic patterns. Right? There are at least four patterns that are mentioned here. We're going to talk about transaction script, we're going to talk about table module, and the domain model. Let me click on transaction script. It says organizes business logic by procedures, where each procedure handles a single request from the presentation. So the presentation is going to say that, hey, get me my blog post, and this transaction script is going to go and get that data using some procedure, probably a database store procedure, and it is going to come back with the data, and that data will be directly given to to the to the presentation, to the UI. Right? Fairly straightforward, and then you use it in scenarios where the application that you are building is fairly straightforward, right? And then once again, I'm going to bring back the razor pages. When you are in the razor pages world and you want to do some form of data interaction, you come here and you read the transaction script, and then you define the model classes using these transaction script. There was a tag that we did not speak much about. Let me go ahead if it is still present. There is something called as index model. I'm going to hit F12 over here, right? On get, you can write your entity framework code here. You can fetch the data, and through that data, you can drive the UI of this particular page. Okay, you keep it fairly simple that there is a view and there is an associated page model to it. The page model itself is going to do the data extraction, and when that data extraction is completed, you are going to render it on this particular screen. All right, so this is the transaction script model. As your application grows a little complex, you can fall back to the table module, and a lot of .NET developers, they kind of use this. A single instance that handles the business logic for all rows in database table or view. This is where people create that DB context object, and DB context is going to have multiple classes. And what we saw in our previous demo was student and courses. This diagram is talking about contract and product and revenue recognition. but then essentially they are all connecting through a single object and extracting data from databases. But as you are getting more and more complex into the domain of the application itself, you have to fall back to the domain model design pattern. This domain model, the object themselves, they are going to be very tightly connected. They're going to have some form of reference between these objects themselves. And not only that, they are also going to have the rules defined on them. Right? So if you cannot issue a driving license to a person of age less than 18, the rule itself is going to get implemented over here. So like this one is saying calculate recognition, we're going to have calculate eligibility or eligible for licenses. So the model itself is going to give you two techniques. If I don't know if I'm going to find it now, but when we were designing classes, when we were talking about abstract data types, we established two facts that a data type is two things. One is how it is stored, and two, what kind of functionalities it provides. Right? The domain model is an abstract data type, and it is going to have a lot of intelligence in it. If a student is in the distinction category, there's going to be, say, calculate class or grade of the student, and that's going to be based on the percentage or the total score. So the student is A or A plus or B minus is going to get decided as a part of the student class itself. So it's going to give you properties for storing members like first name, last name, the marks, what semester they are in, what division they are in. Along with that, it is going to give you a bunch of behavior, right? And in those behaviors, you can persist in a database, but then there's not going to be a one-to-one mapping. So domain model, they are going to be a very complex representation of the domain. We are not going to create tables for those models like one-to-one mapping. The table is going to be separate, and the entire intelligence of the application, which student passes, which person gets discount, or how do we calculate the recognition and interest rate, they are all going to sit inside these domain classes. So with that, this is how our domain logic is going to look like. In MVC application, 90% of the time, you're going to fall for this option, the domain model. Your domain objects, the DTOs, they're going to have some form of intelligence. With this, let's fall back to the catalog itself and bring back the MVC pattern once again. So the model is going to be about domain. The controller is going to call the model. It is going to do its operation. It is going to extract the data, and the data itself is going to get translated or transferred to the view through the controller. Right? What we have seen in the solid principles demo was, let me bring up that code. So what we saw in the solid principles demo is that there was value in adding interfaces. So console.writeLine, it was printing hello world on the screen. But then we divided console.writeLine into multiple interfaces and multiple classes, and then we paired them up in the app.cs class. There is advantage of adding an extra layer of indirection. When you disconnect the consumer from the source of the information, and then you add an extra layer of information between these two, it is called the mediator pattern. And then if I go to design patterns, we have already talked about this book, The Gang of Four. There are 23 design patterns, and we have seen singleton and factory. In the structure, we have seen the adapter pattern, and then in the behavior category, we saw the strategy pattern. Now, another pattern that I should introduce at this point is the mediator pattern. A mediator is going to sit between two entities. So there is one class called colleague 1, there's another class called colleague 2. The mediator is going to sit between these two classes and it is going to do the object transfer. In MVC, controller is the mediator. Right? The controller is going to sit between the view and the actual data. So when there is data transfer that needs to happen, the controller is going to extract that data for you, and it is going to pass it to the that data for you from the model. The model is the place where you're going to have all your application intelligence, your domain. Once the result is available, you're going to send that result to the view, and view is just going to render it on the screen in simple terms. But then view can be PDF, view can be an audio file as well. So to disconnect the view from the model, we have introduced a controller. Now, if we open up the controller itself, it right now is not doing any data extraction. It has no idea of what data to extract, but then it knows that this view here is going to render whatever information it is going to pull from a model. And to do that, let's go ahead and add the entity framework model that we created in our previous sessions. So I'm going to bring up the EF demo class. Right. We saw this on Friday that we have model classes, right? And then we had two classes here, one for the student, one for the course, and we had the university context. I'm simply going to copy this entire code and come to the MVC project, and in the model I'm going to add a new class. Let's call it university model, and I'm going to replace this entire context. So we have student, we have courses, and there's this DB context that comes when we add the entity framework core package. It is going to also bring in the DB set, the DB option, and on configuring, it is going to set up the data from the the entity framework database. I'm going to do that real quick. I'm going to add NuGet package and type entity framework core. Because I know that it is eventually going to ask for the database type itself, I'm going to get the SQL copy of it, install this, and then because it gets a little fussy sometimes, because it wants to do designing, I'm going to include this second package as well. So there's core, there's SQL Server, there's design that we're going to add. And I have to add the required references. This is already added. The configuration tool. I'm not sure if you're going to need this, but then we'll definitely have to add the connection string. So for this thing to work, I'm going to get rid of this section. I'm going to delete the on configuring as well. And in the startup file, I'm going to add services dot add entity framework SQL Server. So DB, add DB context, and inside the DB context, we're going to get options, and using these options, we're going to say option dot use SQL Server. Let me go ahead and oh, servers. Over here, I'll have to give the option of university context. You can ignore this code for now. And then in the options, you're going to say use SQL Server. For use SQL Server, you're going to add the using statement. And over here, we're going to give the configuration dot get connection string. And to this connection string, we're going to give the name of, okay, I'm going to type connection string. And then I'm going to call it university DB. And the connection string itself, we can pick up from this setting. If I hit control, server name is dot. The database itself is DemoDB. And then if I go to properties of this, I'm going to see connection string here, which I'm going to paste, and hopefully it'll get the university DB connection. So close out of model. I'm going to call I think university DB. And then what we have done through this code here is we have wired up our MVC code to use the university entity framework DB connection. With this DB connection added, now we can go ahead and start using that university context. The way I'm going to do that is by adding university context over here, and I'm going to save it. This is exactly like the iMessage writer, the dependency that we injected in the app class. And inside this context, I'm going to do underscore context. Then I'm going to get copy of students. I'm going to save those students over here like this. Now, this is what the model classes are doing for you. Okay, it is not happy about the accessibility. So once you make this public, the parameters that it is accepting, they have to have the same access specifier. So I'm going to make university context public, the course public, and the student data as well public. Right now, if I go back to the home controllers, the error is resolved. It was able to access the context. But if we look at the code structure now, the model itself is sitting inside the model classes, right, inside a file called university model.cs. The responsibility of a model is connect to the database, apply some rules to the student and to the courses, and fetch the data and give it to the controller. The controller is going to receive that data and it's going to pass it on to the views. So I'm going to pick up this thing and pass it on to students. If I now right click and do go to view, notice that it does not have any connection to the model, the student list and the course list over here. So I'm going to get rid of this index action, or better that let's go ahead and add a new action. So I'm going to leave this thing alone, and let's add a new action. So I'm going to hit Control E, Control V, and it's going to duplicate, and here I'm going to say students. Now I can do that var students assigned to underscore context dot students. It is going to get all the student information, and I'm going to pass that student information to a view. Now if I right click and do go to view, it's going to give an error that there is no view present. So right click and choose the add view option this time, and notice the change in folder structure. It is saying that do you want a reserve view empty or you just want a reserve view. I'm not going to choose the empty option. I'm going to choose the reserve view option, and over here it is giving you the view name, and it is letting you select the template model that you want. Okay, I want to list, right? And the model class itself is student, and the data context class is the university student. Now sometimes when you hit the add button after this, it might fail. So let's see if it fails for us. I'm not going to create a partial view, I'm not going to add any script, and I'm going to use the same layout page, right? So I'm going to leave all the other options as is. I'm going to hit the add button, and this is why we added the design package. Sometimes the screen fails on me, and then when it fails, it generally indicates that your solution is not building. And if you see an error message, which I'm very positive that you're going to see it, right? What you need is you will have to do the clean and restore. We have seen this multiple times when we were doing EF core examples. So you come here, you clean the project, you fire rebuild. This rebuild is going to run the .NET restore command, and it is going to get all the NuGet packages. And with this, now if we go back to the home controller, the student action, and add a view, is a view student with the list type for the student class and the university context. I'm hoping that it's going to get through this time. So install Entity Framework core package, Entity Framework core.design. I am very positive that we have that package installed already. Entity Framework core.design. Okay, so we have SQL.design. We don't have entity core.design, Entity Framework core.design. So I'm going to add that Entity Framework core design. Right, so with this package added, I click add view, razor, choose the list, right? Let's take a look at this this file here. The first thing, the difference to index.html is that it does not have any model defined. The student is defining a model with @ syntax, means that it's a C# code. It's defining a model, and it is an I enumerable. It is not a list, it is not a collection, it is an I enumerable, right, of student. Now it is setting the page title to student. There's an h1, and then there is an action called create. Okay, we're going to see what happens to this action. Then there's a table with t head, T head has a row inside it, and these are all the headers. Now it is using another razor syntax, and it is saying that HTML that display name for this property, first name, last name, and course. So there are going to be three headings in this particular in this particular row. Then there's a for each loop. Now for each, once again, is C# syntax. The model here is going to refer to this model, which is a collection of students. Now we had display name for, and over here we have display for. This is going to display the property itself, like first name, and this is going to display the value that we have inside this member, right? So it is going to generate three rows, and then there are three actions with ASP action. This is going to become the name, and this is the route ID. This is going to become a part of the URL. So I'm going to save this and hit the university app button. If it gets the connection string the right way, it is going to fetch the data for us. But we don't know how to go to the student page. So I'm going to click on privacy and notice something in the URL. The URL says that it is port 5001. We saw this in the launch setting.json file. Home itself is the controller name, and then privacy is the action. Now we added a student action, so I'm going to replace privacy with student and hit enter over here. And let's go back to the controller, and it is plural, it is students. So I'm going to have to change it to students. And when we do that, it is fetching all the 1000 students from the database. Remember seeing my name as a first student, right? The create new from the Razor page itself, if I come back to the CSS_HTML, create new is taking an action name. Now this action, we did not create this, but let's go ahead and copy this. I'm going to hit Control C, and I'm going to go to index page, not the index page. I'm probably going to go to where we had the navigation underscore layout.cshtml, and over here we see that there's a home button, there's a privacy button. We're going to repeat this code. We're going to do Control E, Control V. It's going to replace this, and let's paste what we copied there. I don't want create, I want students, and then the action that I want is also students. Let's make up some room. This is generating a URL based on these actions. I might have to copy this, but let's try. Let's comment this code out, and if I hit the save button and go back to the UI and hit refresh, okay, I'm not seeing the students link at it, so I'm going to have to stop this and start it again. And I'm seeing student link added to this particular list. The UI is a little messed up, probably some styling, and it's going to work fine. But then now if I click on this, it is once again going to go to the right student action. So with ASP-action, you can specify the action name, and it is going to display, it is going to take you to that particular page. If I copy this class here and apply it to this anchor tab, the UI is kind of going to fix it, if not now, in the next run. But we have added a link to the action page. The way to do that is ASP-action. Now let's come back to the student Razor page. There is an action called create, which we have not created. Once we create that, it is going to give us a different output. @HTML is a category of ASP.NET MVC, and it is called HTML helpers. HTML helpers, they are going to generate a UI element for you. So this th, if I go back to UI and hit Control U, the th of the table is replaced with this property name itself. Now there's a way to modify that. I'm going to come to first name, hit F12. This is where we have defined it. In these square brackets, I'm going to say display name, and I get a pop-up suggestion from Visual Studio, and it says that add this DLL or add this reference system component model. And over here, if I say first space name, I'm going to hit the save button, and notice that there's a different color squiggly under this thing. This is purple, I guess. Right? We have seen green and red. The purple one indicates that this code is not compiled. Right? You will have to restart the application for everything to work. I'm going to hit Control F5, which is going to build the code. It's going to launch the application. We have already fixed the UI of the application, and that's why student is appearing better, because we applied the class to it. Once I click on it, notice that there's a space between first and name. It is because we modified display name with first name over here. Alright? Create new is an action that does not exist at the moment. So when we click on that link, it takes us to the create page, but we have not created that page yet, and that's why we are seeing a 404, HTTP error 404. And then all these links, they have multiple options for edit. Notice the URL at the bottom, home/edit/1, and then details, home/details/1, and delete is home/delete/1. We can go ahead and add those actions all in our controller over here in the home controller. We can go ahead and add those actions, and then we'll have to create a corresponding view for all of them. So this is going to be delete, and this is going to be edit. But then these parameters, they're going to take different actions. So it is already 10 on the clock. We are going to